referred to earlier is not just a random list of words, but it's based on some pretty robust evidence. And here's a continuation of that with more potential cognates. And if you had some time to look at the English here, then you'll see that these are really core vocabulary items, some basic vocabulary, also some culturally relevant vocabulary like taro, and soft-shelled turtle. And there's so one of the interesting words in there is the word for like fish poison. But nevertheless, most of this is basic vocabulary. So why do we think that these are inherited and not borrowings? The main reason is because of regular sound correspondences. I'll go through a few of the ones that I'm more familiar with here. So, like for example, we see this conditioned raising of low vowels from when we compare Proto Tai to Proto-Austronesian, you see that Proto-Austronesian low vowel in the final syllable corresponds to a raised vowel in Proto Tai, and that seems to be conditioned by the presence of a high vowel in the penultimate syllable, which is now gone in Tai itself. And when there is no high vowel in the penultimate syllable, then the low vowel in Proto-Austronesian corresponds to a lengthened low vowel in Tai that you can see there. There are numerous other vowel correspondences. Of course, like I said, I can't get into all of these, but there's vowel breaking, vowel lengthening, vowel lowering, all with specific phonological conditions that seem to strengthen the case that these are inherited vocabulary. And then just really quickly to look at the work of Osterpira. Osterpira has gone into the consonant correspondences in much greater detail than I have. And I know that just putting these on the screen like this is very helpful for historical linguistics, but we just don't have time to get into it. Sorry about that. That should be figure 1, not figure X. But so because of this evidence, we consider Austro Tai to be a legitimate linguistic family. We consider that relationship to be a sister relationship. So we are not following proposals from Sagar or Blench, for example, who place Kra Dai at different levels within Proto-Austronesian or have different interpretations of this data. Our interpretation is as shown here, that Proto-Kra Dai and Proto-Austronesian are sisters descended from Austro Tai. So that's the assumptions and the basic comparative evidence to support that. So in the remainder of this presentation, we're going to present the results of our Bayesian analysis, and whoops, sorry about that. And we'll talk about the implications of the timing of the Austronesian Kra Dai split and the super developments of those two groups. So from here, my colleague Jian is hopefully going to speak to us from abroad. Are you there? Are you ready?
Hey, yes, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hello everyone. Let me introduce the story. First, I will explain the status of the Bayesian method. About the Bayesian method.
Okay, sorry, Jian?
Hello?
Yeah, we're having some issues with the audio.
Yeah.
We might try to fix it, but I might take over.
I think it.
Let's
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'll take over. We anticipated that this might happen. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to take over. But that's okay. If during the question and answer session, if Jian wants to say something, maybe he can text it or type it in the comments and I can read it. So basically, the advantages of the Bayesian method. When compared to some of the more rigid statistical language models of the past, like some people who I would say incorrectly accuse Bayesian phylogenetics of just being fancy lexical statistics, there's actually some strong advantages to the system that make it more accurate in developing language phonologies. And some of these are based off of these 3 assumptions. So assumption 1, this is also just a basic assumption of historical linguistics. Words can be lost or acquired in the language. The Bayesian model allows for that. But the critical stuff that makes Bayesian better than past computational methods is, two, it allows for vocabulary to evolve at a faster and a slower pace. So it doesn't assume that there's a constant rate of change in lexical replacement. And that particularly was one of the worst features of past computational methods like lexical statistics, the assumption of a regular rate of change. Bayesian methods specifically allows for different rates of change and different rates of vocabulary replacement. And then number three, because of that, it allows languages to evolve at faster and slower rates compared to one another. So this is just a methodology of building a Bayesian phylogenetic tree. So this is really quite similar to how we do traditional comparative methods. So we gather lexical data and make cognate decisions on that data. Those cognate decisions are made by somebody like me, somebody who has a knowledge of the languages and the sound correspondences and is able to say with some degree of certainty that these indeed are cognates. Then those cognate decisions, I think the laser is dying, but that's okay, are coded into binary data and then fed into the tree. In the tree, and the model has different prior information, and that prior information includes things like branch length or calibrations or constraints or model parameters. So like, for example, if we know from archaeological evidence that a certain area was settled at a certain time, then you can put that prior information into the model, and that will help the model create a more accurate kind of root age, for example. So you can put in a lot of prior information into the model that will help guide it, just as the same way that a traditional comparative linguist would, say that because archaeological and paleoenvironmental evidence suggests that the Marianas were settled around 3,500 years ago. Because of that, we can say that the Chamorro language has been developing in that area for at least 3,500 years. That same type of prior information is given to the Bayesian model, and it takes that into account when it makes, judgments of time depths. And if YU Jian were able, then he would give much more detailed information about the stuff that's going on there. But unfortunately, the audio isn't on our side today, so I'm unable to give much of an insight here. But the output is the posterior distribution of trees. And so basically the model creates millions of different possible trees based off of the input, and then that is compiled together and it's into the most likely tree. So we applied these methods to Austro Tai languages, or maybe you would like it better if I'm saying Austronesian languages. We include 35 Kra Dai languages and 109 Austronesian languages in this sample. And these are the locations of those languages. You'll notice that the Austronesian sample is somewhat restricted. It doesn't include languages farther to the east. But as this work progresses, hopefully we'll be able to include more of that data. And those languages belong to these. Okay, so we run this data through 6 different models. And these models were tested for constructing the family tree. They're split into 2 main types. The CTMC model allows for cognates to be gained and lost at the same rate. And the covariant model allows each cognate set to remain relatively stable over time, but occasionally switch to faster rate category. Basically, what the covariant model does is it allows lexical replacement to happen at more variable rates. It allows a greater rate of variability. So we have those 2 main splits. And then within there, we have the strict clock model and the relaxed model with a long normal distribution. Strict clock model assumes that substitutions happen at the same speed across the whole tree. The relaxed model permits the rate of change to differ within each branch. So the first model here, that laser is just gone. Wait. No, there it is. So you can see model 1 here allows for the most variation in lexical replacement, the covariant relapse log normal clog model. Okay, let's get past that. And then we further calibrate the data with certain time constraints, and these time constraints are based off of various insights. I really wish that YU Jian were able to give more information about these specific constraints, but these time calibration constraints were put into our model, well, our 6 models. And so the distributions of the likelihood values for Austro Tai using the 6 models are shown here. Each model was run for 200 million generations and a sampling frequency of 20,000, which means that we sample 1 per 20,000 generations of running the model over the course of 200 million generations. With the burn-in of the first 10% of samples, and those samples, the first 10% are discarded. Higher x-axis values indicates a better model fit. So, yeah, the one over there is the one that has the best fit because it has the highest x-axis value, and that is, of course, the model that allows for the most variation in lexical replacement rate. This is the density generated by the program. The green lines are areas of less agreement. The blue lines are areas of high agreement. And we just added those to sort of show where the high agreement was. Kra Dai is down here at the bottom. So there's a very strong split between Kra Dai and Austronesian. So you have, did I put this in here? Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah. So this is the tree maximum credibility tree, which is created from that from the tree I showed you on the last slide. There is a, I thought I put some stuff in here. There's a strong split between Formosan and between Kra Dai and Austronesian, and then another strong split between Formosan and Malayo-Polynesian. The clades were collapsed by language groups. Each language branch was assigned the specific color. So here we have the model itself, and this neat little round thing here. The macro language phylum level, the Bayesian phylogenetic reconstruction showed that the Austro Tai languages first split into Kra Dai and Austronesian, as I just showed, indicating Kra Dai is a sister language of Austronesian, not a sister branch of Malayo-Polynesian, as per SAGOG. For Kra Dai, all 5 branches are monophyletic and supported by 1.0 posterior values. So that just basically means 5 branches of Kra Dai are modeled with very, very high confident rates. So posterior probability is how confident the model is. 1.0 means 100% confidence. So when inferring time depths among the 6 models, the estimation for the average root ages were between 7,000 BP and 7,800 BP. So that essentially means that our estimate for the root age of Proto-Kra Dai is around the 7,000 BP to a little before 7,000 BP range, which is sort of an expected outcome. That's sort of what we would expect. So in the best fitting model, the average time estimates is right around that 7,000 BP range to a little bit before. So the interesting thing about this is that the time span from Proto-Austro Tai to Proto-Austronesian is continuous in our model. So our model gives a range of possible root ages for Proto-Austro Tai, up to beyond 7,000 to closer to 7,000 to 6,000, and then our range for Austronesian is in the 5,000 to 6,000 range, which fits pretty well with archaeological evidence. So what that basically means is that there's more or less a continuous time span from Proto-Austro Tai to Proto-Austronesian. However, over here, there's our root ages for Proto-Kra Dai are in the 3,000 to 4,000 year range, which means that there's a gap between Proto-Austro Tai and Proto-Kra Dai of several thousand years that doesn't exist between the root ages of Proto-Austro Tai and Proto-Austronesian. During the conclusion, I'll talk a little bit about what that might mean. We're running out of time a little bit, so I'm just going to skip to this slide. Actually, before I talk about all the stuff up here, I really want to sort of emphasize this bottom paragraph. What this shows is the sites of various archaeological sites and the dates associated with those archaeological sites on the coast of China and also in Taiwan. The dating of those archaeological sites fits within the time frame of Austro Tai based on our model. And of course, you can make some pretty provocative claims because of that. But I definitely want to emphasize that we can't say with any level of certainty that the people who were responsible for these archaeological sites spoke Proto-Austro Tai or some Austro Tai language. I definitely don't want to make that claim, but we can just see that there is temporal overlap between the root ages of Proto-Austro Tai and the existence of some material culture in this area. And that in itself is rather interesting. So the traditional comparative linguistic evidence, I think, continues to support Austronesian and Kra Dai connection. We interpret that connection as being the product of a shared common ancestor, Proto-Austro Tai. Computational Bayesian approaches complement the comparative evidence and also support the Austro Tai hypothesis. The Bayesian time depth analysis suggests that the Austronesian Kra Dai separation is around 7,000 BP, a little bit before, a little bit after. Proto-Austronesian is dated to around 5,000 to 6,000 BP, and Proto-Kra Dai to just beyond 3,000 BP, closer to 4,000 BP in some other models. So these dates complement the archaeological evidence and fall within expected timeframes. But we do still have this larger than expected gap between Proto-Austro Tai and Proto-Kra Dai. So I'll just take maybe 30 seconds to a minute to talk about that. Why is there this big time gap? Well, one way to interpret these findings is that if that time gap is real, then it's not necessarily the case that Proto-Kra Dai itself was the only. It's not necessarily true that Proto-Austro Tai split two ways into Proto-Kra Dai and Proto-Austronesian, and then Proto-Kra Dai just continued to develop. There may have been multiple sisters to Proto-Kra Dai. Proto-Kra Dai itself could have been the only surviving remnant of a much larger group that existed in this area in the 7,000 years ago time frame. Of course, I'm speculating right now, so these are really speculative statements that I'm making. But with that greater than expected time gap, it does suggest that there may have been some language leveling events that resulted in Kra Dai being the only survivor and having its time depth go back to just about 4,000 years ago. And I think that generally there is some evidence that sort of a language leveling event did occur in the area. So that's it from us. Thank you very much, and we'll